I am Dr. Cyril Fischoff, a chiropractor and a specialist in musculoskeletal ultrasound practicing in Mauritius. I invite you to listen to a new episode of the Vertebra & Co. podcast every first and third Monday of the month. This podcast is dedicated to the world of musculoskeletal medicine and is for everyone. We discuss the mechanisms involved, diagnoses, treatments, and the prevention of various musculoskeletal pathologies through short clinical stories, the latest scientific research, and interviews with specialists. Hello everyone. In our last episode, we broke an old paradigm. We learned that osteoarthritis isn't just simple mechanical wear and tear. It's not an anatomical inevitability, but a real biological crisis involving neurovascular distress of the subchondral bone, that's the bone under the cartilage, a loss of ligament proprioception, and a functional shutdown of what we call peri-articular muscles. So if you missed that first part, I highly recommend listening to it to understand the deep mechanisms that drive pain far beyond what a simple X-ray shows. So today we're going to talk about therapeutic solutions. We're done just taking it, we're moving into active medicine. I still hear this comment far too often in consultations. Anyway, there's no cartilage left, there's nothing to do but wait for a joint replacement. Well, that's wrong. Today we're going to open the modern toolkit for management. How do we quiet down this chemical storm of an inflammatory flare-up? How do we bypass the neurological block to reactivate a muscle that is shut down, inhibited? And what are the cutting-edge injection therapies, from simple lubricants to biological modulation, that are changing the game? So let's start first with what we call a congestive flare-up, meaning an inflammatory flare-up. In the previous episode, we compared this congestive flare-up to a volcano. Cellular debris saturates the joint, the synovial membrane becomes inflamed and secretes a pathological fluid highly concentrated in catabolic cytokines. At this stage, there's a golden clinical rule: you don't rebuild a structure while it's on fire. Trying to force the joint during an active flare-up under the pretext that you need to keep moving is a major mistake. First, you have to stop this inflammatory storm. There are several options. Thermal protocol. This is the exclusive time for cryotherapy. Cold induces vasoconstriction and a powerful analgesic effect by slowing down nerve conduction. Apply wrapped ice packs for 15 to 20 minutes several times a day. Heat, on the other hand, is strictly reserved for chronic muscle stiffness outside of flare-ups. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or corticosteroid injections, which can be prescribed by your doctor, act as firefighters here. They don't cure osteoarthritis, but they immediately cut off the vicious cycle of enzymatic destruction. Relative rest: we drastically reduce the load and eliminate impacts. But we maintain very gentle passive movement to preserve synovial health without irritating the tissues. Once the smoke from the fire clears, well, the real reconstruction strategy can begin. So first, let's look back at what we call arthrogenic muscle inhibition. This is a defense mechanism where the central nervous system voluntarily weakens the control of peri-articular muscles, like the quadriceps for the knee, to protect the painful joint. Well, the problem is that this reflex shutdown persists, and so the subchondral bone absorbs 100% of the impact forces with every step. The muscle no longer plays its role as a protective shock absorber. The question is how to hack the nervous system to restore motor control without waking up the pain. Well, this is where modern neuroscience and neuromodulation techniques come in, with PENS, percutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, leading the way. What is PENS? Well, unlike classic TENS, which uses superficial skin electrodes, PENS relies on the temporary insertion of fine acupuncture-style needles close to the afferent nerve branches of the joint. The reset mechanism: by delivering a low-frequency alternating electrical current directly to the source, PENS saturates the nociceptive pathways and modulates the afferent message at the level of the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. We activate the inhibitory interneurons. This isn't just a passive pain-relieving effect, it's a real neurological switch that instantly lifts the reflex shutdown of the muscle. So, once this neurological block is cleared, once the breaker has been reset, well, that's the time to reintroduce exercise therapy, starting absolutely with isometric work. Isometrics involve recruiting muscle fibers statically without generating joint movement or changing the length of the muscle. To take a simple example, let's look at the knee. Sitting with your legs straight, you contract the quadriceps by pressing down on a cushion under the back of the knee for 6 seconds, followed by an equal relaxation period. The joint remains still, the pressure inside the joint stays stable, but the nervous system relearns how to recruit the motor unit that the PENS has freed up. Then, once control is stabilized, the clinical progression goes like this. Closed kinetic chain exercises with a fixed point of support, like controlled mini squats, to stimulate mechanoreceptors and proprioception without shearing stress. Next comes what we call eccentric strengthening. We work the muscle as it lengthens to optimize its role as an active decelerator and shock absorber. Now another therapeutic avenue, anti-osteoarthritis nutrition. We too often link excess weight to osteoarthritis from a purely mechanical angle. Well, that's an incomplete view. White adipose tissue isn't just extra weight. It's a highly active endocrine organ that secretes pro-inflammatory molecules called adipokines, like leptin. These molecules circulate systemically and directly attack chondrocytes, even in non-weight-bearing joints like those in the fingers. Optimizing your body mass index isn't just about lightening the load on the structure, it's about lowering the body's overall inflammatory thermostat. So, for what we might call a daily nutritional shield, there are several things. First, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Our modern diet is structurally pro-inflammatory due to an excess of omega-6. It is essential to saturate receptors with omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, which can be found in small oily fish, cold-pressed oils or walnuts, and thus inhibit the arachidonic acid cascade and cytokine production. Polyphenols and antioxidants, turmeric for example, boosted by piperine, berries or green tea, act as free radical scavengers directly within the synovial fluid. Supplying molecules like glucosamine sulfate or chondroitin sulfate provides the necessary building blocks to support the extracellular matrix. We're now going to look at all the techniques known as regenerative or proliferation medicine. What can we offer when classic conservative therapies are no longer enough but surgery is still premature? This is where clinical research has made a major paradigm shift. We've moved from medicine that masks symptoms to medicine that modulates local biology. To fully understand our current toolkit, we need to distinguish 4 main approaches, each with its own anatomical target and precise biological timing. First, corticosteroids. We talked about them earlier. They are the firefighters. This is a powerful, fast-acting steroidal anti-inflammatory. Its sole purpose is to put out the chemical fire, and its timing is strictly during an acute inflammatory flare-up. You don't rebuild anything with corticosteroids, you simply stop the enzymatic emergency. There is also hyaluronic acid. Here we're talking about viscosupplementation. It's a high molecular weight polymer that acts as an engineered lubricant. Its goal is purely rheological, meaning it restores mechanical cushioning and fluid movement. Ideally, it's used when things are quiet, outside of an inflammatory flare-up for moderate osteoarthritis to bring flexibility back to the joint. A third tool, often underestimated and little known but incredibly clinically relevant, is Prolotherapy. For a long time, this technique was limited to peri-articular use to strengthen ligaments, entases, and so on. We have a series of high-evidence clinical studies validating its use in intra-articular protocols. By injecting a hypertonic dextrose solution directly into the joint cavity, we create a controlled osmotic gradient. This stimulus triggers a remarkable biological cascade. It activates the release of endogenous growth factors, stimulates chondrocyte proliferation, and promotes extracellular matrix synthesis. Additionally, dextrose acts as a neuromodulator directly on the intra-articular pain receptors, reducing what we call neurogenic inflammation. That's inflammation triggered by pain. Clinically, the ideal approach is often to combine this intra-articular method with injections into the surrounding ligament attachments. It's a two-pronged strategy. We treat the internal biology of the joint while stabilizing the microtraumatic instability of the ligaments we discussed in our first episode. Finally, the gold standard of biological modulation, PRP or platelet-rich plasma. This is an autologous injection of your own growth factors after selectively spinning down your blood. PRP doesn't just lubricate or soothe, it regulates chronic inflammation and resets local homeostasis. By concentrating your platelets, we deliver a host of signaling proteins directly to the site, capable of changing the behavior of synoviocytes and chondrocytes, shifting them from active degradation to structural stabilization. Finally, another therapeutic path, movement. Movement truly is medicine. To structure the treatment plan, we have to return to an absolute physiological truth. Cartilage is an avascular structure, meaning it has no blood supply and it gets its nutrients purely through imbibition, much like a sponge, a sort of biological sponge. It squeezes out metabolic waste under load and draws in nutrient-rich synovial fluid when the load is released. Prolonged immobility dooms cartilage tissue to cell death. So the clinical art lies in applying the optimal load, finding the therapeutic zone where mechanical stress is enough to stimulate what we call mechanotransduction and bone building without crossing the threshold into structural damage. There is a very important rule called the pain-free rule, the rule of no residual pain. A workload is helpful if the pain response during the effort remains clinically manageable, less than 3 or 4 on a scale of 10, and completely fades in the hours that follow with no inflammatory rebound the next morning. If there is pain after exercise that lingers, then yes, we've overloaded it. Varying the stress, alternating between adaptive weight-bearing work, like Nordic walking or cycling, and non-weight-bearing work, like swimming, helps maintain cardio fitness and neuromuscular activation while avoiding overloading areas of bone hardening. In conclusion, tackling modern osteoarthritis means refusing to accept the verdict of a simple X-ray. It means deploying a comprehensive, connected, and scientific treatment strategy, curbing acute inflammation, lifting muscle shutdown through neuromodulation and isometric, improving the biological environment with systemic nutrition, and using innovations in regenerative medicine and intra or extra-articular prolotherapy to stabilize the joint. We must understand that the joint is not locked in an inevitable process of decay. It constantly adapts to the mechanical and biochemical signals we choose to give it. Join me again very soon for a new episode of the Vertebras Uncovered podcast. Meanwhile, take care, stay active, and if you ever have any questions for me, please feel free to contact us on the podcast page vertebrenco.com.